Windows and doors. One day per month, the first-year students met as a group and visited various instructors for their magical warrior training. It enabled them to perfect new spell based on the instructor's specialty, thereby rounding out their arsenals. In Miss Morning's class, they had learned singing charms that could lure their targets to sleep, to make them weep and collapse in misery. They had also learned slanging, which would cause an enemy to tear himself into shreds. That each whittled a small piece of instrument that, when played, would cause the enemy to go insane. Megan had a variety of other instruments she kept in her arsenal as well, but most of them were too difficult for those less musical to learn properly. Mr. Appleblossom had spent his day teaching slam poetry and stunning qualities to the students. Both required an ability to think on one's feet, for the words uttered had to fit the situation. For example, it was an attacker on a vehicle. One could aim an explosive slam at the tires to make them blow up. And they had followed up with a singing slam to the driver, setting his hair on fire. Lanny was especially good at slams, and Sam had excellent in psychologies, not just stunning kinds, but opposite qualities as well, which would make the enemy do the opposite of what he intended to do. Sam had planned to use that one a lot should they go to battle. He felt that if he could get several opposite qualities going at once, he could make his foes turn their weapons on themselves. Today's lesson was Miss Octava, and Alex had arrived in her classroom feeling chipper despite having dreamed about Aaron yet again during the night. But he tried to push it aside and focus on the class. Miss Octava was going to let Alex introduce a new spell he had created. She said he could teach everyone how to cast it. After all he'd done to catch up with the others, Alex was proud to have this chance to prove that he had succeeded. When all the students had arrived, Miss Octava called Alex to the front of the room. "Alex, tell us about your spell," she said. From the pocket of his component bed, Alex pulled out 2 tiny balls of clay. He rolled them between his fingers to warm them up as he sauntered in front of the class. "The new spell I created is trapping clay. You aim it at the arms, legs, or neck you wish to trap, and it hardens immediately upon impact, trapping the target in place." Alice hid a wicked grin and called Lanny up to be the victim. Lanny flashed him a suspicious look, but slowly made her way to the front. "A larger ball of trapping clay can encase an entire person. Like this," he said, picked up a larger ball, wound it at him, and said, "Full body cast!" He flung the clay at Lanny. "No!" she squealed, but it was too late. The clay had found his mark and spread over to his entire body. Her blood poured. "Alex!" came a muffled cry from inside, followed by a rhetorical hollow chuckle. "I guess I deserved that," the students laughed. Alex smiled revenge at last. After a moment, though, he tapped the hard shell and cast a release spell. Nanny took a deep breath of fresh air and punched Alex playful in the arm. "You got me," she said. "Clever." Alex blushed. "You took that awfully well." "That's my way of making you feel bad." "It's working," Alex admitted. "Okay, everybody," he said. "The class, give it a try. If you can, find a willing partner. You can call out shackles if you just want to chain somebody's arms or legs," he said, and his eyes lit up. "Dog collar is a fun one, too." They spent their morning trying out the tapping clay, and after lunch, Miss Octava gave them a painting lesson to calm them all down. Each student sat with his own easel and practiced defensive painting, which would allow them to quickly paint themselves out of any precise situation. Alex was already a professional at defensive painting, so he went to the corner of the room where he kept his easel. He picked up where he left it the previous day. "May I join you back in your little corner, Alex?" Nanny asked. Alex looked at her suspiciously. Is this a trick? No, don't be a jerk. Alex tilted his head and narrowed his eyes. You have a suspicious history, Miss Haluki. Lani rolled her eye. In case you haven't noticed, I haven't done anything to you impositively this months. I'm done, okay? Get over it. I guess that's true. Alex was quiet. He turned back to his artwork and began dabbling thoughtfully with his brush. What are you painting? A window, he said. He shrugged in 3 directions of the nearest open window. That one. There. Why? I'm practicing my 3D art. If I do this right, by the time I'm finished, I should be able to tear the sheet off, stick it in the wall, and put my arm straight through it to the outside. Cool, Lani said. Is it hard to? Very, muttered Alex. I haven't been able to do it yet. Why do you want to make a 3D window anyway? I know, windows are just easier than doors. Miss Octobel told me to start with this. I've been trying for weeks, and it's really getting boring. But I think this one might work. You really need to shade and layer and get all the colors and textures right. So why do you want to make a door? Where do you want to go that you can't use cube to get to? Lani shook her head, slightly puzzled. Dunno, he said lightly. Lani narrowed her eyes. She put her paintbrush down and gripped her Alex's arm. Do you want to go to Quill, don't you? She whispered. Why do you do that, Alex? You're going to wreck everything. Shh, Alex said when Miss Octava glanced in their direction. I don't want to wreck everything. Don't be ridiculous. You want to see your brother. Oh, Alex, why? He's not like us. He's evil. Keep your voice down. Sheesh, Lani. Aaron is not evil. He's exactly like us. He did artistic stuff too. Only I took the blame for it. He should be right here. It's not right. You'll put our time in danger. What are you thinking, Alex? Lani shrugged her head in disgust. It's too late for him. Maybe he should have been here too, but it's too late. Did you tell Mister today about him? No! And you better not either. Sighed Lani and slumped in her chair. Please don't do it, Al. Alex sighed too hard and stared at his painting out of the window, shaking his head. And then he ripped off the easel and tore it into little pieces. Disgust. I'm at the rate I'm going. You have nothing to worry about. He sighed and rested his head on the window ledge. When he looked through the glass, he saw Will Blair walking across the lawn in distance. Will stopped and stood for a moment, and then he turned to Miss Ogden's classroom. He raised his hands impatiently and pointed to the library. Alex's stomach clenched. Why would Will Blair want Alex to meet him at the library? Alex turned quickly to see if Alice saw, but Lani and the rest of the class were focused on their work. All except for Samet, that is, who stood at an easel at the back of the class, looking out of the window. He nodded, his face furious. Then he packed up his things quietly, and when Miss Octava and Ball with another student, Samet slipped out of the room. The library. After several visits to Mr. Today's office, Alex had Aaron's dorm room memorized, right down to the knots and scratches in the wood. Everything as Alex worked privately in his bedroom to perfect a 3D doorway to Aaron's room so he could save him. He couldn't stop thinking about Will and Sam sneaking off to the library. They did it at odd times, sometimes during assemblies and sometimes during large group trainings, sometimes late in the evening. Once, Alex tried to follow them, but he tubed into the library and they had disappeared. What could they possibly be working on? At first, Alex didn't care. He was just glad Will hadn't been gesturing that time in Miss Octava's room, but he grew more curious at his long, lonely nights of drawing and painting wore on with no one but Sylvie to talk to. And Sylvie wasn't making life easy for Alex either. What are you doing in there? Sylvie would ask every 10 minutes or so. He obviously hated that Miss Alex worked in cramped sleeping area between the bed and the wall, rather than out in the open living room where Sylvie could actually see for himself what was going on. And ever since the episode, as Sylvie liked to call it, he hadn't left Alex alone. I'm not doing anything, Alex wouldn't always say, growing more his back and all the time with his nosy blackboard. Leave me alone, will you? No, sang Sylvie cheerfully. After one such episode, Alex, frustrated, rolled up his paper, tucked it in his arm, and stormed out of his room as stormy as one can be when entering a tube and pushing a button. He didn't want to give Sylvie the satisfaction of knowing where he was storming off to, so he pressed lounge, and then when he got to the lounge, he stayed in the tube and pressed library instead. Out of the corner of his eyes, he saw Megan and Lani at the table having milkshakes, but then he was gone again. Inside the library, he roamed to all of his usual work stations, but all the big tables were occupied, and he needed a big table to spread out his 3D drawing. He moved to the seldom used stairwell and walked rather tubed up to the second floor, and then, seeing more stairs, up to the third where he had never been before. In fact, there was no button for the third floor in the tube. He only thought there were 2 floors at all this time. There was an odd-looking sign that said Archives on the stairwell wall next to the door. Alex went in. It was dark inside, but little light popped out as he traveled down the rows of books, cards, and maps. It smelled musty and old. His stomach flipped when the door clanked shut, and he ran back to make sure he wasn't locked in. He wasn't. With a sigh of relief, he meandered between the shelves to the large table in the back corner, perfect for what Alex needed. He rolled up his doorway, bumping in several 7-foot-tall totem pole statue with 3 stacked faces. The middle face opened an eye, scowled, and then closed his eyes again. Sorry, Alex whispered. He unrolled his paper and spread it his app. I wish there was no more light. The table lit up with a blush white light and shone through the paper. Alex surprised looking at his drawing. Each line feeling very individually and defined, and the blueness, the bright light pointing out of the flaw and kept the drawing from working the way it was supposed to work. Alex whistled under his breath as parts of the drawing deepened before his eyes. Inevitable. Mr. Today looked away from the long row of blackboards when he heard a growl outside his office. Come in, Simber, he said. Florence, welcome. A moment later, Claire, Morning, and Miss Octava arrived, and the group arranged itself comfortably around the large office. Simbo sprawled on the floor. Florence eased in the sturdy-looking, grossly oversized floral love seat as if it had been fashioned just for her, and the 2 instructors sat in the office chairs near Mr. Today's desk. The maid shuffled papers on his desk and set them aside, then looked up at his guest. Thank you for coming, he said. Simber, what's the news? Alice discovered this hallway, Simber began. He's been here 3 times, as far as I know, from my view at the door. Once with the boy Samet late at night, twice during Tuesday lunches. Mr. Today nodded. What about Will Blair? I haven't seen Blair, but he could be using an invisibility spell to enter now. Thank you, Simber. Octava? All seems well with Alex, still negligently. But such is a life of a painter. He's working on 3-dimensional paintings. What sort? Windows and doorways. That's his thought. Quite ambitious. Octava looked over her half glasses and read it down her snout. Mr. Today said. How close is he getting to? Not terribly close, but he's getting better. It's a very difficult posture, as you well know. Florence cleared her throat. I've spoken to the Grinos down at the gate. Urja said that Blair boy is acting suspiciously. He's been to the gate twice in the past weeks. And the ostrich statue in the library reports Blair had convinced the young Samet to have been working on an art project. Samet's working with Blair? Mr. Today asked, a hint of concern in his voice. Florence shrugged her massive shoulders. Look that way. Claire enveloped. What's Will Blair's issue? I'm afraid I don't quite understand. It is complicated. You see, Blair's father is a general of Quilitary. Blair been bitter since he arrived here 3 years ago. years ago, because if he had been a wanted, he would naturally be sitting in Aaron's place right now by default of his heritage. Will had gotten more bitter since he discovered Aaron was cruelly stolen his seat of honor. Mr. Today pointed to the backboard of the place. There in the high priest Justine's own private office sat Aaron in the earnest discussion with the ruler of Quill herself. Aaron made quite a name for himself. Gunnar reports that the boy had just been appointed assistant secretary of the high priest. No one so young had been held so high a position. Mr. Today turned to face the group. Will is extremely jealous. See things so hard that he no longer sees things as they are, but he just wants them to be. When he reunites with Samhead, his former neighbor and friend, they began to talk about Quill. Will found out that Aaron was the person who reported Samhead's infraction, which put Will over the edge. He's become obsessed with watching the screen, putting Aaron in the palace, having lunch with the high priest and Will's own father, General Blair himself. The room was silent for a moment before Claire spoke. So he wants revenge on Aaron. Yes, how? Mr. Today pursed his lips. That I do not know yet now. Shouldn't we try and stop him? Yes, we can stop him. You know we can, Mr. Today said carefully. Claire shook her head. I also know we won't. That's correct. But why? Claire said impatiently. When we have the means to stop him, to both Will and Alex, before Quill discovers and ruins our time, before they put us all in danger. Some of us are sure to be killed. Everything will change, everything. Mr. Today bowed his head into his hands and said nothing. His shock of white hair pointed at the wall behind his friends. After a moment, Simber responded in an uncharacteristic ally soft purr. Because neither boy had broken the law. Because we don't punish bad ideas or thoughts or intention. Because the moment we do, that's the moment our world takes its first step towards becoming like Quill. But for our own good and safety. Claire, Mr. T said quietly, before we start interfering with free thoughts, where do we stop? Believe me, I've been down this road. But you know yourself that you can protect our world without a wall. You can wipe out the entire land of Quill, and we can be safe forever, if you just choose to stop it. The mage smiled sadly. And you know, Claire, that I will not be around forever to protect our time from what's beyond Quill. Each person here must have something at stake in order to take ownership of our land. If our people have nothing to sacrifice, nothing to protect, well, how happen to our time when I'm gone? The office was stifled in heavy silence. Then what do we do? Claire said finally. Mr. Tenney scratched his chin. We prepare, and who knows, maybe something good will come. He took a deep breath. Florence, have you begun the lethal weapon training? Yes. Very good. I want everyone to have the knowledge and ability, whether they choose to use it or not. Claire find Gunnar in the forest and ask him to come see me. Simber, keep a close eye on Will, Blair, and Samhead. I'll put a shimmer shield in the entrance to this hallway so you can tell if someone invisible walks through it. And the boy, Mr. Today thought out loud. Yes, I'll care of Alex myself. He clasped his hand together and he met the solemn eyes in his command. All right, then. Let's be as ready as possible, shall we? Together, each person's statue and creature in their room nodded. The Eliminators. Early every night when his eyes and hand gave out from working on the doorway, Alex recognized over Aaron. How? He asked himself over and over again after weeks of failure to produce a doorway that would lead him to his brother's dormitory room, or anywhere for that matter. He shook his head. I don't know. I can rescue you. But how do I get to you? There's gotta be another way. One night, Alex had all the tossing and turning he could stand. He left his room, walked down the stairs, past the two statues, who nodded both civilly, and went outside for a walk to clear his mind. He didn't see Simber or Florence exchange a glance, nor did Simber leap nimbly up the path of stairs to the mage's private quarters. And then, instead of going into the jungle, he turned back and walked diagonally, the direction almost no one cared to go because of the awful memories that accompanied, to the giant iron gate. In the light from the stars, Alex could make out the shadowy figures of the four Grinos keeping guard as they did endlessly, seeming without rest. Alex cleared his throat. "We see you, Mr. Blair," one said in a pleasant voice. "You may approach without fear." Alex bit his bottom lip and stepped out of the shadows. I'm not Will Blair," he said, not knowing quite what else to say. "I'm Alex Doise." "Oh, so you are," said the one whose name was Tina. "Look, ladies, a new one has come to face his fears." Grino smiled. The one Irene asked, "What brings you here tonight? Can't sleep? Feeling wonky?" How do you know?" Alex could feel the ground shiver just slightly as the two of them sat down hard and turned attention to the back of the door. "We rarely get visitors. When we do, it's usually for two reasons. Most often, someone comes to face the iron door in hopes of seeing in a different light from the God side of things, thereby casting the horrid memories of Quill. Does it work? For some, yes. What's the other reason?" Alex asked presently, hoping the ladies couldn't read his mind. Ariana blinked her milky chocolate eyes solemnly. "To escape." Alex's heart throttled, but he held his expression firm. "Oh, that seems strange," he said. His voice sounded a bit wee and thin in his ears, so he tried to breathe in using his diaphragm like Miss Morning had taught them, and inquired, "I didn't think the door would work as a way out. Isn't it locked from the other side? And who would want to escape to that awful place?" Tina groomed her hair, glowing rectangles in the starlight. "Right on both counts, Alex. He's a clever one, isn't he, Arita?" Arya nodded. "There are two ways out of Quill, but only magical ways to get back in. We can't open the gate from our side, unless, of course, someone from the other side unlocks it." Alex frowned his brows. "Two ways out of Quill? What's the second? We're told only one way out through this elimination. Through this gate." "Well, of course you were told that, my boy. I don't think even the governors know about the other way. And if they did, they wouldn't tell the people of Quill," said Tina. Arya gave Tina a stern look. "Don't tease the boy, Tina. How would he know?" She turned back to Alex. "There's a secret passage from the palace beyond the walls that the High Priest and Marcus created long ago when Justine took over the rule of the land. As far as High Priest knows, Marcus is the only other person in Quills who is aware of it." Alex's eyes widened. "But the palace," he said, thinking, "what lies beyond it? Where does that passage lead to? Great Forest? To enemy territory?" "Why?" Tina began. "The sea, of course." "What?" Alex incredulously. "But what about the threats of the borderlands, the Quilitary? The Quilitary that blasted barbed wire ceilings that protected the entire land from the intruders." Arena stopped over to the boy. "There now, dear," she said, and sort of nuzzled his shoulder comfortingly, and as if he had quite calmed down. Afraid to lose control of the action of the people of Quill, she sighed. The land of Quill and our time attached is an island. It is one chain of all islands. We once traded goods with other lands, but was before Justine had the wall constructed, I'm told. Alex shook his head, defeated. I can't believe it. Why would they lie to us? He whispered. What about the old people? Don't they remember? Irina shook her head, her black silky fur catching the stars light. No, Alex. They were made to forget. What do you mean, magic? Alex stood there, blown away by what he was hearing. Magic and Quill? He shook his head in shock. But who? Who would do such an awful thing, taking people's memories? The ladies were silent. And then suddenly they stood at attention, peering into the shadows beyond Alex. Me, said a voice from the dark. This is the end of this video. Bye!